name's Dave Isaacs, and I'm here to introduce you to the drummer in your right hand. We don't usually think of the acoustic guitar as a percussion instrument, but it is something you hit to keep a beat. And when we form chords with the left hand, we get harmony. And we can do a whole lot more than just keep a beat. We can create a groove. A groove is going to add a sense of forward motion and drive the song. So when we play this rhythm part on an acoustic guitar, we're actually putting all the basic elements you would have from a whole band playing, all in one place, all in your two hands, because we can play the chords and the groove on a single instrument. So today we're here to talk about the groove and how that rhythmic drive is generated by your right hand. And the essential idea is to realize how much more you can do with your right hand than just strum up and down. Now let's talk about rhythm a little bit. We'll start with the pulse. Every song has a pulse. It's the constant heartbeat. It's the underlying steady beat that holds a song together. And it can be faster, or it can be slower. But just like your pulse, just like the pulse in your wrist, it's not likely to be going from fast to slow and fast to slow. It generally, over the course of the song, is going to stay consistent in one place. We create beats and grooves by adding layers of rhythm that match the tempo or speed of the pulse. So to do this, we're going to learn to think like a drummer. Now picture a drummer sitting in a drum set. There are drums of different sizes. There's a big one here on the floor, the bass drum. And there's a variety of others that could be surrounding where the drummer sits. And then we've got the tin, the metal, hi-hat, cymbals, everything else around here. What we're concerned with are the two main sounds that you hear in any groove, and that's going to be the bass drum, played with the foot, which makes sort of a low thump, and the snare drum, played with the hand or the stick, and that's going to make more of a high snap. So those two sounds together might be something like this. Now we're going to bring that idea to the guitar. Most guitars have 6 strings, so we can pretty neatly divide this up into 2 areas. We've got the 3 bass strings, lowest in pitch, and the 3 treble strings, highest in pitch. And it is worth mentioning that to most people's way of thinking, the guitar is upside down. What I'm calling the bass or low strings are closer to the ceiling, and what I'm calling the treble or high strings are closer to the floor. But of course, we're dealing with sound, so when I strum a chord like this, my hand is moving down closer to the floor, but the sound you're hearing is going from low to high. So now think back to our drummer and his drum kit. Bass, snare, low sound, high sound. Now I'll play a chord, and I'll alternate between the bass strings, low, and the treble strings, high. Now just by adding some variation, this starts to come to life. Faster. You still hear the lows and the highs. I can do it on another chord and do it faster still. Now the other thing starting to come into play here is the idea of dynamics, and that means loud sounds versus soft sounds. When I say that the different sounds, the lows and the highs, are in balance, we're talking about the relative volume, the relative loudness or amount of accent we're putting on each one. So I can accent the bass more strongly, accent the treble more strongly. And that just means that one sound is louder than the other. So now I'll go back and forth playing the same chord, but switching from accenting the bass to accenting the treble. Here's the accent on the bass. Here's the accent on the treble. Now I said that we're primarily thinking about just the bass drum and the snare drum, but there's also the other elements of the kit, and the most important one I think from our perspective is the hi-hat, because the hi-hat makes a high cutting sort of sound. It's going to fill in the spaces in between these two sounds. Might be something like this. So then when I strum back and forth, especially since I'm using a pick, which creates a brightness all of its own, something like this could be something like what a drummer plays on a hi-hat. Now I'll bring the bass drum and the snare drum back into it. So you have all three of those elements. We have what we're going to call the downbeats, the bass drum. That's here. What we're going to call the backbeat, the snare drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. And I'm creating that effect by swinging my right arm a little further than I would to hit the bass strings. We talked about the hi-hat, which is the back and forth. So here it is all together. So if we were to sum all of this up in two simple ideas, it's that there's two things we're playing with. We're playing with contrasting the low sounds and the high sounds you can produce on the low strings, bass strings, and high strings, treble strings. Just the way that when a drummer sits at a drum kit, they're contrasting the sound of that low bass drum and that high snare drum. That's one aspect. And then the other is the dynamics. How hard is something hit? How loud does it sound? And when you put all of those things together, the balance between low versus high, and the balance between accented strongly or not accented at all. Those are all the elements that create the groove together. So with these two simple concepts, you can really bring a song to life. So the next step is to apply these ideas to your writing, to make a groove as much a part of the writing process as melody and chords, and get to know that drummer in your right hand. I'm Dave Isaacs. Thanks for watching.